Everybody, welcome back to the High Performance Zone. Today I have Dr. Christian Conte. We call him Doc. Let me tell you, this is one of the most powerful interviews I've done. We go deep, we go raw. He's a level 5 anger management, works with conflicts, works with people incarcerated, but also works with the most high performance sports teams and family therapist. I mean, the guy is amazing. Okay, we're going to talk about how do you actually breathe life into others. All right. We talk about meditation. We talk about visualization, but most importantly, he's got this yield theory, which says, let's meet people where they are. Okay. And that's the start. 3 things: listen, validate, and explore options. Okay. We go deep, many different things. Stand by. Gucci and Doc Conte. Ready? Hit it. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the High Performance Zone. Today, I'm really excited to have Doc Conte, who, by the way, Doc, I know you went to prison, and we're going to talk about that. Before we talk about going to prison, how do you introduce yourself? Because you and I were having this conversation offline.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Conte, and I'm a human being, so I'm happy to be here. I'm grateful to be here. No special introductions. Honestly, I always tell people I speak all over, and I always tell people when I get ready to speak that I could tell you background and degrees and accolades and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, if what I say doesn't resonate with you, if you can't take the information that I have and immediately apply it to your life, then really all that stuff doesn't matter. So for me, I really don't spend a whole lot of time on introductions.
Love it, brother. Hey, so let's get back to my initial question. So why'd you go to prison, man?
Yeah, so to be clear, I chose to work in prison.
Yes,
And
yes.
I even did a TEDx talk where I said why I chose to go to prison, and then I realized through the years I probably should have put why I chose to work in a prison setting. I believe we all. My tagline has been this: I've worked with thousands of people all over the world. I work with some of the best athletes in the world, first ballot Hall of Famers. I work with celebrities on TV shows. I work with people struggling in solitary confinement, some of the toughest places in the world. And what I have found, Gucci, is this: the world boils down to 2 kinds of people. There are people who have issues and dead people. So everybody's got issues. Everybody's got issues. That's 25 years in January. I've been doing what I've been doing, and I've been using that tagline my whole career because I really see that we all have issues. So coming back to prison now, so there are different ways people are incarcerated. We are psychologically imprisoned. I know people who are incarcerated behind bars but are as free mentally as possible, and I know people who have every freedom in the world but are psychologically incarcerated. So I listen, I feel very passionate about helping people become the best versions of themselves.
Nice.
And I originally got into it because I probably don't look like the typical counselor. Yeah, I'm 6 foot, 260-pound, bald-headed guy with a beard. I don't know if this is just audio or video or whatever, but if people can't see me, I look like every other biker at a biker bar. And
Yeah, you do. Hey, man, I got a Harley, a 95 Softail Custom. What kind of bike are you
that's
riding?
awesome. I have a Kawasaki Vulcan Custom Special Edition,
Love it.
and yeah. But I tell you what. So what I do is this. So I spent some time doing kind of undercover stuff where I would go in and I would do stuff without telling people who I was, and I got an insight on how things were run. And what I saw was a couple things. One, I saw, so for instance, in the state of California, after you commit a violent crime and you go to prison or jail, you're mandated to 52 weeks of anger management. So you can imagine how mad
Nice.
people were, which is great. It's helpful for them. It's a change. But so I went and I kind of would observe this stuff and I would sit back and the guys would just think I was one of them and I would listen. And I saw a
Mhm.
couple things that were just awful. And I think this is really fascinating and worth hearing. But what I did is I heard a couple guys, they had to write this letter of accountability before they could graduate this group. Well, the way they were doing is there was a guy who was getting ready to graduate, and it was his last day in the final moments. And there were about 3 or 4 guys sitting around him going, "Oh, erase this, scratch this out, put this, write this." So they were literally writing his letter minutes before he turned it in. He turns it in. The guy who's in charge of the class looks at it and he goes, "Oh, this is excellent. That's great. Good job. You're accountable." And so I saw a bunch of bureaucratic BS that it wasn't really accountability. And so what I did immediately when I started to take over groups is I threw that idea out and changed the system up because I saw a couple things. One, the guys could they could say whatever they wanted to say, and then they weren't really changing, and that to me
Yeah.
wasn't acceptable. Listen, I'm a family person. My wife and I've been married 23 years this year. Our daughters are life. I want to make the world safer for them,
Yeah.
and the reality is that if people are just saying whatever they need to say for some bureaucratic paperwork, then they're not really changing. And then on the flip side, the guy that was teaching the class, he was like, listen, some of you are psychopaths. You're never going to change. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, if I'm in the group and I hear that, why would I want to change? You know what I mean?
Right.
So I saw that work needed to be done on all sides. And that's what I did. Like I've spent the last, well, I'd say maybe 11 years here in Pennsylvania going into maximum security prisons. I work with the officers and I work with those who are incarcerated on the inside and trying to help make some genuine prison reform, genuine change. And we're seeing it, man. We're seeing some big changes.
Man, blessings to you. First off, I want everyone to know you've got a level 5 anger management certification. That is extremely rare, right? Why don't you tell us what is that?
It is. It was an honor to achieve that level. I think there are only four of us on the planet with it. The other three are like 30 years older than I am. I love them all. So I feel blessed to be able to have that. I've done it was an honor because it was like based on some of the work that I had done. I made a video called "Getting Control of Yourself: Anger Management Tools and Techniques." I think actually the general public can get this video now, but it's shown in prisons all over the world. We get a lot of feedback for people who are incarcerated that they gain a lot from it. I mean, these are hands-on practical techniques. Like this isn't the old days where people tell you to count to 10 and walk away. I can tell you how that could cause tremendous damage if you're somebody that struggles with something called seething rage. So it's hands-on real world stuff. And
Wow.
that's what I dedicate my career is making stuff, break down complex subjects, make them easy, make them applicable, and help people have takeaways that they can use right now.
Well, let's dive into some of those, right? Because first off, two resources, and we'll put this in the show notes. One is your TED Talk, and I do agree. You titled it "Why I Went to Prison," right? What'd you title it?
Yeah, why I chose to go to prison.
Well, I chose to go. By the way, I wouldn't change it. That's a hook, brother. That's a good hook, right? And then, of course, what they don't know is you're a PhD doctor, all this kind of family man. And just so everybody knows, if you're not watching this on YouTube, and we're going to put some clips up, man, Doc Conte looks like you could fit in, bro. And I say that with a compliment, right? I mean,
Thanks.
you got what you didn't say is you got tattoos. What's that on your
Yeah.
neck? Like, look at your
Yeah,
arms,
that's
man.
about it everywhere. Yeah, yeah, got a lot of tattoos. I love tattoos. I just do.
Yeah.
I just genuinely like them. Yeah. Tattoo
Evidently, I
on
mean,
my neck. Yeah.
and when I say you fit in, I could see you. First off, I want to say thank you for going into the toughest areas and doing some of these things. But what you said earlier, I want everyone to know is, you work with some of the best athletes and celebrities in the world too. It's not just convicts like Gucci. By the way, I could have been a convict. Pretty good one, I'm sure. But the idea here is I hear you worked at Florida State, University of Oregon. I worked with Oregon football also, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Tennessee football, Pittsburgh. Give me a couple of those real quick, and then we're going to pivot to what are the lessons that an average human being, and I love what you said, is we're either got issues or we're dead, right? So
Yeah.
this isn't about prison. I love using extreme examples like the Blue Angels to really get to the average person. But I'm curious about the football. Well, tell me, why were you brought in and what'd you teach them?
Yeah, so I try to help people maintain control of their emotions. I specialize. I have that level 5 in anger management, but what I do is so much more than just anger management. First of all, I've been a general therapist my whole career, so I've worked with people struggling with every issue across the board. And what I see is
Hey, I'm
this.
going to interrupt you for a second, which is my prerogative, I guess. Why'd you choose to be a therapist? I love that, by the way.
Well, when I was young, I was a teenager. I was kind of a haughty, know-it-all teenager, like most teenagers. And my dad was an earth scientist. Right? He's just a giant of an intellect. He taught English literature for 15 years, and he switched over to earth science for his last like 35 years of teaching, or 40 years teaching total, I think. So anyway, one day I asked my dad. I said, "Why do you study rocks? Like, how is that exciting, right? Earth science." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, if you're only going to live on one planet your whole life, don't you think you got to get to know that planet?" I So, wow, that's deep. So when I was in school, when I was in college, and I was trying to find things to study, I thought about his advice, but I thought about it just a slightly differently. I thought, well, if I'm only ever going to live with me my whole life, why not get to know myself? So that's how I got into
Wow.
psychology, and I just felt really passionate about it. I played sports my whole career. I hit a home run in the College World Series.
Whoa,
In
no kidding.
baseball. Yeah, yeah, and
Okay, you got to tell me what year was that? Who were you playing for?
1997, Slippery Rock University, where I met my wife, by the way.
Nice.
Yeah, I started off at Virginia Tech, then I transferred to Slippery Rock, and we went to the
Which
World
I don't know if
Series.
people know, Slippery Rock's in Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is.
And it's a great beer drinking university, I was
It
told.
is. Yeah, it was a lot of
What's the local beer?
Yingling.
Yingling.
Okay, Yingling. Yeah,
Okay.
it is. We
You
used to
see, I
always
know a
say all
little bit
this.
about Pennsylvania, but
That's
anyhow,
awesome.
you hit the World Series. Keep going, man. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah. So I mean, I remember my dad flew down to the game, Mobile, Alabama, and he flew down, and just in time, he was at work, so he missed the first game. My dad came everywhere to see me play, but he got in there, and just in time, I was able to hit a home run. We lost, we got killed, but it was all right. It was a great memory, and I never made it professionally, so I love to bring up that moment. And so anyway, so I was in sports my whole life, and I loved sports. I got a chance when I was younger, when I was an undergrad. I was a junior in college, and a sports psychologist at the time for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Dallas Cowboys, Dr. Kevin Elko. He was
Hmm.
from my hometown, so he took me under his wing. I mean, it was awesome. I mean, we're talking about the early '90s, and I'm sitting and giving psychological tests to the Pittsburgh Steelers and sitting with Bill Cowher to tell him about the results. I mean, it was just awesome. So I
Wow.
loved sports. But I also felt very passionate when I got into counseling about helping people from just so many diverse backgrounds. I did
Yeah.
in-home therapy, so I would go into people's homes, and I would quite literally be in people's homes where you take your shoes off literally and metaphorically, where you're deferring, but you're in a position where you're trying to really help people and see the world from their eyes. And we'll get into in a bit, but yield theory, this theory I developed, started in '98. It's an evidence-based approach. It's about trying to see the world through other people's eyes. So leading with compassion, conscious
Wow.
education. So coming back to sports. So you asked about how do I get into sports and all that stuff. So when I was a professor, I was a tenured professor at the University of Nevada in Reno. Got my doctorate in Pittsburgh, Duquesne, taught there for a year, went out west. And while I was out there, I kind of missed being involved with sports and things. So I just started to work with their swim team and a couple of the the boxing team. And I was enjoying doing that kind of stuff. So then when I came back here to Pennsylvania, I sat down and met with some people at Pitt, and I started to work with athletes. And what I resonated with the kids because I showed them time and again, it was sports psychology is about life. It's about life. Like if you can clear away that mental
Nice.
clutter and be present, um, you'll perform at your peak. Like you can't perform at your peak if your mind's on your relationship, if you're thinking about something else. But if you can clear your mind and be fully present, it's going to work. So yeah,
Well,
that's kind of the secret.
okay, I'm gonna plan a book note here. I want to go back to. I want to hear the rest of the story real quick, but I want to go back to. Well, how do you stay present? How do you clear that clutter? I don't want to lose that, so just plant
Sure.
that. But go. So you're working with sports teams, and what else do you learn?
So working with the sports teams, what I saw with the young men, especially in these big football programs, these kids are big, they're strong young men, but they still have those impulses that any young men might have. And so what I would teach them time and again is how to have self-control, self-discipline, to be able to understand that, listen, no matter what kind of emotions you have, no matter how intense they ever get, they will always have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So no matter how intense, emotions come and go, but actions can't be undone. Words can't be unsaid. So I would teach them how to take control of that. Yeah, and I love that kind of stuff. I'll never forget Biz, one of my favorite guys, a lineman for the Pittsburgh Panthers. Huge lineman. I remember one day I was just joking with him about this. I saw him recently, but he said we have all these. They're getting ready to break the huddle, or they're getting together before practice starts. And Biz, this guy's 6'5", 300 pounds, muscle everywhere. And he goes, "Okay, remember what Dr. Conte said. We're going to be mindful. Mindful on three. 1, 2, 3, mindful." And I thought, where in the history of sports, me growing up, would that ever be something that was said? And he laughed. He was like, he remembered it. He was like, well, you taught us to be mindful. And it's important. You got to be mindful no matter where you are. But I thought it was cool integrating that kind of stuff.
Man,
Talk to kids about life.
I'm so glad you shared that story. That's awesome. Hey, it's funny. I was just doing an event this morning. We have a leadership training once a week with the company, and we used the Kobe Bryant tape. I don't know if you've seen this. It was an interview. It was a podcast he was on, right? And he said the exact same words you did. Emotions come and go. To actually embrace them, but let them go, just like your breath. And then he made a second point where he said, we all have good days and bad days, but he said, can you get better every single day, just a little bit better? And over time, if you truly commit, 9, 10 years, wow, you become great. Right. So it's exactly what you were just saying. Tell me, what have you learned having, firsthand impressions with people like that?
You know, when we talk about being mindful, we talk about being present. Like one of the big questions is how do we get present? I'm talking
Yeah.
to a big time
Perfect.
coach right now, and the coach is he's struggling about being present. Now he knows this stuff, he knows it intellectually. The
Right.
challenge in life is this, and this is what we're coming to in the world today with things like Chat GPT. We have access to incredible information.
Yeah.
And my message to young people these days is we're all going to have access to information. That's going to be as easy as it is to ask your phone whatever you want to ask it. But the difference in what's going to separate people is who lives the message. It's
Mhm.
one thing to be like, oh, I know about this. It's another thing to say, I actually live my message. And one of the greatest lessons that any of us can ever learn is how to be present. So there's an anecdotal saying that people who struggle with depression primarily live in the past. Oh, this should have happened, that should have happened. People who struggle with anxiety primarily live in the future. What if this? What if that? But people who are happiest and who can find peace live in the present. And how do we get there? How do we get in the present moment? Well, it's less complex, but that doesn't mean it's easy. To be present is to be mindful of yourself, your thoughts, without running with your thoughts. So let's say, oh no, I'm worried about getting present. Instead of running with those thoughts, I observe them and go, this is interesting. Almost as if I could step outside myself and look inward and be like, in this being in this moment, his heart's racing fast, his thoughts are spinning. But instead of attaching myself to those thoughts, observe them. You can begin by feeling what you're sitting on. If you're standing on something, feel the feet, feel the ground under your feet. If you touch your fingers together, start to feel that. You can get present very quickly. And what I teach young people is, especially in sports, there are things like this, touching those fingers together. That could be what you do. Let's say you go out, you're a wide receiver, and you're going out, and you might be thinking, oh, what about this player? What about this? And what if this? We got to get present. We got to get rid of those thoughts, clear that mental clutter. Let's get present. And for instance, if you're a wide receiver, you might focus on the X. And what I mean by that, if you ever looked at a football coming at you, if you look at the football, there's an X right
The
there.
nose.
Yeah, the nose. So if you're a wide receiver, you want to focus on the X, and that's really what you want to be looking at.
Yeah.
Rather than all those other thoughts, focus on the X. If you're a baseball player, instead of saying, don't strike out, don't strike out. Well,
Right.
what are you going to be thinking? You're going to be thinking strike out, right? Instead, come up to the plate and say, see the ball, hit the ball. And there are ways to practice this presence, but I'll tell you honestly, Gucci, one of the biggest difficulties today is ego. Ego gets in the way. Ego likes to tell us, well, I already know about that. I already know about that. Well, great. It doesn't matter what you know. It only matters what you actually do.
Man, I love it. Hey, I love what I use the term trigger, but trigger in a good way, not a trigger that creates anger, let's say, or negative emotion, right? This idea of having some sort of physical thing. And I love the idea of touching your fingers. It was interesting. No one ever taught me this. So it's so cool that you are out there actually teaching this, right? It's so important that people hear from someone like you that there's these tools and techniques. So when I would do a night carrier landing, this is one of the most scariest things you can do in life, right? And before you actually are landing on that carrier at night, you're in what they call the holding stack, right? And you're holding, waiting for your push time, which is 45 seconds in between. So a jet's landing every 45 seconds, and you got a lot of procedures you got to do. Plus, it's about just being mindful, because it's dark, it's scary. And then some nights you throw in bad weather and then low on fuel. It's like any athlete, you add the pressure, and you got to have a trigger. So my trigger was, I took my oxygen mask off and I just took a couple of deep breaths. And then when I put the oxygen mask back on, they call it a bayonet fitting, so it's cool. It goes in and clicks. And then I would do with this with my hand. I would just go 1, 2, 3, and then 2 pumps. And I just made that up, Doc. I mean, no one taught me that. What it did is it dropped my mind into, okay, for the next 2.5 minutes, you're going to be absolutely focused and present. And I love that you use those ones. What are some other ones that you've noticed in not just business and sports, because we all can do this in life too? Yeah, give me a couple of others. I love what you just said.
First of all, I'm super grateful that you just shared what you just shared. That's just awesome. Like I'm really live. One of my strengths in life is gratitude. I can't sing, I can't dance, but I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for everything, every day. And so to get to learn that, to be behind your eyes in that cockpit, I tried to visualize that. I tried to hear that sound of that click as you described that. That's really cool. I think that's something that can help a lot of people. So I'll pass that forward as a great message. Um,
Please.
so one thing that I do is when I played baseball. So I was an outfielder, and I wasn't this big back then. So I was skinny and fast, and I was a center fielder.
Nice.
And as a center fielder, if you have a line drive that's hit right at you, and you just, as soon as the ball hits the bat, you take off in after it, could go over your head. If you jump back right away, it could fall short. So what you're taught to do as a center fielder when a line drive comes directly at you is drop. You kind of drop your energy and then take a moment. That lesson stuck with me my whole life. So what I do when I walk into a really dangerous situation, when there's chaos, when there are high emotions, is I still visualize myself dropping my energy. So I'm not just going to run forward into it. I'm not going to run back away from it. I'm just going to drop my energy, step back, and take a look. But that's one of the most powerful metaphors that works for me.
Wow, I'm so glad you shared that. So now we both. I'm so grateful. Also, by the way, wearing the Glad to Be Here T-shirt. We're gonna get you one. That looks like a big size, man. What size T-shirt you
I'm
wear?
a 2X. I'm a 2X. Yeah, yeah.
And so everybody knows that's muscle, by the way. But very, very cool.
Hey, I
But
got 120-pound dumbbells on the incline press today for 11 on my first.
11,
So 11
120.
120-pound dumbbells. So yeah,
Good for you, man. You
felt
must have been
strong.
working out with these teams
I
too.
felt strong. I did. I did. I've always liked to work out with the kids.
Yeah. Wow. But what a blessing on that example you used. I played a little baseball, not at your level. And I do remember a line drive at center field or shortstop. Well, shortstop's different, but at center field, you're right. What do you do? No one actually taught me to drop, though. That's cool. And I think that that's a great analogy in life, right? I was even visualizing, I live in Sun Valley, Idaho, so we have real animals out in the backyard here. We get moose, we get wolves, and
Wow.
that kind of stuff. And when you, and I got 2 dogs. They're by the way, Rhodesian Ridgebacks. You know what those are?
Yeah, yeah, those are cool. They fight lions in some places, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. But I watch them and they do exactly what you just said. And I've tried to learn this too. When they first see a wolf or a moose, they don't go after it. They don't go back. They just kind of drop and observe. And it's a really interesting to watch animals. They know this, right?
Mhm.
And then they talk about, like if you see a bear, I mean, what do you do? Right.
Yeah,
And great
yeah,
examples.
yeah. I have 2 dogs as well. We have a German Shepherd and a Cane Corso. My Cane Corso, she's 10 months, already 110 pounds. She's awesome. I just love this dog.
Nice. What is that? I'm not familiar with that breed.
You have to Google it later. It's like one of it's got a 700-pound bite force. It's one of the more
Whoa.
stronger protection dogs you can get. The type of work I do, I like knowing if I travel a lot that my family's safe.
Oh, good for you, man. Hey, you brought up your family a couple of times. I want to just dive into that. It's such a warm feeling to see you because here you are. You're really a strong dude, right? Mentally and physically, right? But you're also a warm person. You can feel it in your heart. Tell me about your daughter, man. You said she
Oh,
was the
she's phenomenal. So she's 17, and when they have children, they might say, "Oh, we have an angel," and then as soon as their child, as a toddler, messes up, they say, "Oh, the little devil." Well, we
yeah.
we never saw anything but an angel, and she always has been that. And of course, I worked with a lot of people who were very abusive through the years, so I had developed what I call my 4 C's of parenting before we ever had a daughter. 4 C's are simply choices, consequences, consistency, and compassion.
Oh,
And
nice.
so, literally never had to, never spanked her, never yelled at her, but she listened immediately because we were just very consistent. And I always saw it as my job to teach her. I always tell parents I have what I call my 1,000 times rule. And my 1,000 times rule is this: until I tell her something 1,000 times, I'm not going to lose patience. So I'm
Wow.
about to lose patience because I think, think about you and I, we might be advanced in our careers. We might be in a spot to help people. We might be doing a lot of things right, but we still make dumb mistakes. And so when we make
Absolutely.
dumb mistakes, where's the judgment, right? So instead of judging it, say, okay, if I'm still making mistakes, I'm certainly not going to get mad at my daughter for making mistakes. Um, but yeah, I mean, she's phenomenal. She just earned a scholarship to the school she wanted to go to. I'm not going to say it on air here, keep her school for her, but she went to a university that she wants to go to. She got a
Nice.
scholarship for it, 4.3 grade point average. But here's the thing that
Wow.
I love: she is probably the kindest human being you'll ever meet. Like, we would literally have teachers say they've been teaching for 30 years and they have never met a young person who literally doesn't say anything negative about anybody. So
Wow.
she's a different energy. She really is. She's just a different energy. So I light up getting to talk about her.
Hey man, let's go. I want to pivot to her because you mentioned something about, you work with a lot of people who maybe didn't have that upbringing, right? They actually had an abusive family. And like you said, there's actually a lot of people out there, even if it's not physical, it's emotional, right? And so what have you learned on how to help people who may have had an abusive relationship? And what did you put into practice that allowed your daughter to be what you just described?
Well, a couple things. So first of all, the first part of the question is, how do we make people aware? One of the things I try to make people aware of, I take the game film approach that we would do in
Mm.
sports psychology, where we look at a game film and we say, what did I do effectively, ineffectively? What can I do better next time? And I take that very same thing, and that's a staple of what we call an assessment in yield theory. So I would look at a parent and say to, if it's a mom, I might say to her, instead of judging yourself, let's just put this up on a metaphorical screen and say, what did you do that was effective? What was ineffective? What could you do more effectively next time? So I try to wipe away the judgment because regardless, even if we have the most insightful judgment on planet Earth, we can't change 1 split second anyway. So I'm not going to waste time judging people because I found out through the years there's a difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is fine. You feel bad, you hurt somebody, you feel bad about it. That's healthy. Then learn from it and don't do it again. Shame, however, so guilt's feeling bad about what you've done. Shame is feeling bad about who you are. And what I have found for a quarter of a century, doing intense work, thousands and thousands, 20,000 plus hours, what I see is when people live in shame, they act out of shame. So if there's a parent out there who feels shame, that parent is more likely to continue to do negative, hurtful things to their children than they would if they were able to shine a light on that and learn from it. So game film approach. That's one thing in terms about that. Then you asked about what did I do that we think that my wife and I did that were contributed to it. Well, we always looked at our job as parents as teaching. It's our role and position to teach her. So instead of saying you're wrong or bad, we just kind of looked and said, what can you learn from this situation? We were as proactive as possible. So, for instance, my wife would take her when we would go to the playground when she was young. We would prepare ahead of time. You prepare ahead of time. Hey, honey, there's going to be a beginning, middle, and end to this time at the playground. And when the time's over, we're going to move on to the next adventure. And if we stay in this one, we're never going to get to the next. So we would practice that. And then by the time it got to the end of the playground, all the other kids are screaming, yelling, crying. Should be like, okay, let's go on to the next adventure. And we
Wow.
practice ahead of time. And then meditation. She meditated for 10 years straight, never missed a day from the time she was six and a
Wow.
half years old. And by meditating every single day without fail, it taught her something that I think is pretty profound. Not many 17-year-olds can say they've been doing something every single day for 10 years already. And I attribute a lot of her ability to self regulate, her ability to go with the flow, to her meditation. I think that's profound. I mean, I had her through junior high. She was memorizing a chapter of the Tao every month. So this
Wow.
young lady can spit out 30 chapters of the Tao, just rattle them off. So we put the types of things in her purview that we wanted to be there. I used a bucket as a metaphor. Actually, I have a really cool lesson. Like I tell young people, I'll take a bucket and say to people, I say, if I give you a bucket, what are you going to put in that bucket? And kids say whatever they're going to say. I do this all the time, and I say, what are you going to put in your bucket? Now, here's the point: whatever you put in your, let's say I give you a bucket. What are you putting in it?
First off, physical health and mental health. So I'm going to make sure that I get outside. I do something physically. I love the idea of meditation and gratitude. I'm going to put gratitude in my bucket.
Awesome. So you have gratitude in your bucket. That's phenomenal. Now watch this. Whatever you put in your bucket's going to be in your bucket. And you say, Doc, man, that's so obvious. Come on now, it's so obvious. But the same is true with your mind. Whatever you put in, if you fill your mind with violent movies, violent video games, violent music, you're going to have violence in your mind. And if you want peace, you have to put peace in your mind. And so be mindful what you put in your bucket, because whatever you put in it, it's going to be in it. And I'll give you a story about how this kind of resonates through parenting. So I remember one time when she was in junior high, and again, 17 now, close to turning 18 here soon. And she was in junior high at the time, and she came home from one of her friends' house, and she said, they were going to watch a preview for a scary movie. She said, but I didn't watch it. And I said, it was on TV. I can understand you were allowed to watch it. She said, no, I knew I was allowed to watch it, but I just didn't want that in my bucket. I mean,
Wow.
to be able to be that, to take that information and integrate it. That's
Yeah.
what the message was. Because I saw father after father through the years say, my child will never do that in front of me. And I sat with the kids who would never disrespect their father in front of them, but then would do tons of stuff when they weren't around. And I never
Wow.
wanted it to be for looks. I never wanted it to be like, she's going to respect me to look. No, I wanted it to be, you understand the lesson. If you choose to
Wow.
put violence in your mind, you're not going to feel good. It's up to you. You need to do whatever you need to do. But my job in life is just to arm her.
Yep.
And so that's the mentality it's been for parenting.
Okay, so two questions come out of that because it's really deep. One is I do want to go back to the meditation. I'm interested in what did you teach her and what type of meditations do you do? Okay, and you can tackle either one of these first. And then the second question is how do you deal with all the negative information or news that, is like you said early on, all this stuff is being put at us. How do you deal so that that doesn't become your bucket? Those are my two questions. Pick one.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how do you deal with that information? So there was a man who was at a restaurant, and he was a pretty frugal guy. He didn't like to spend money. He was at this expensive restaurant, and he got a meal, and the meal was terrible. He hated it. The meal was awful. And so the waitress came over, asked him about it. He said it was terrible, and it was so expensive. And she said, "What do you want to do?" He said, "Well, I want to buy another meal." And they're like, "Well, why would you buy another one if you didn't like that one, right?" And we think that's so obvious. Why would this guy buy a second meal and invest his time, energy, and money into something he didn't like? And if that seems so obvious, then why do people turn into the same news that makes them so angry day in, day out? So one thing is pay attention to what you're putting in your bucket and what you're putting in, what you're choosing actively to listen to all the time. The other thing is to recognize this: all you're ever getting is a perspective. When you get information, it's simply a perspective. All too often, especially when we're young, we have a tendency to say, well, this is how it is. So think about an organization. If there is any one individual in an organization who declares this is how it is here, and they really believe that they know how it is everywhere in the entire organization, that's silly. All they can declare is, all they can say with any kind of truthfulness is what it's like for that person. That's it. That's it. And so when you understand that, I think the skill of discernment is probably one of the most powerful skills that we can teach people to understand. Like, for instance, if you don't like somebody, you don't have to get a bunch of other people to dislike that person too. You can simply have had a negative experience, and maybe that person was having a bad day. Maybe there are other, but why rally other people to dislike that person just because you didn't have a great experience with them? And then conversely, why jump in and be swayed to dislike someone because someone had a negative experience with that person? That was their experience with it. So I try to help teach not just our daughter, but people in general. Parts of the way I teach is that skill of discernment. Recognize like a Venn diagram. If something mixes on a Venn diagram, doesn't mean just because it's here, it's overlapping, that it's everything. All right. So the other aspect to the question was the meditation one.
Yeah.
And meditation there are different forms of meditation.
Yep.
Our family is practicing Zen Buddhist, so we,
Okay.
we, we, we do it in line with our belief system.
Okay.
But you don't have to have a belief system. Like I tell people all the time, like, first of all, everyone has faith. Faith's a psychological construct. You can't get rid of it. You either believe something started from something or nothing, and you believe in what you believe in. Faith is psychological concept. It's inescapable. But in terms of a belief system, there are many different ways you can practice meditation. The most basic form is to practice observing, be sitting and being present. First thing people say to me is, "Man, I can't meditate because I can't turn my mind off." I'm like, "Well, good. You don't turn your mind off. You're still alive. You don't want to turn your mind off. You want to become the observer." And that is freeing for many people. And hopefully someone listening here today
Yep.
says, "Wow, I don't have to turn my mind off." No, you don't have to turn your mind off. And you don't have to control the outside. Well, my environment's loud. Listen, I teach meditation to people in maximum security prisons, in restricted housing units, what you would know to be solitary confinement. And it's not what it is in the movies. These are some of the loudest areas of any given institution. People screaming, yelling all day long, all night long, and trying to be disruptive. So it's a very loud. The goal in meditation is not to control the outside environment. Well, everything needs to be perfect for me. No, it's to control yourself regardless of what's happening outside. So that's a basic form of meditation. But then there are compassion meditations, and compassion meditations are really, there's tons of research to demonstrate that they're extremely helpful for people and can increase your own compassion. And I will say this other statement about meditation in general. 20 years ago, I would have been hesitant to talk about it in certain environments, but now I talk about it everywhere. Why? Because in 2023, what we know from neuroscience is this, that as sure as push ups give you stronger chest muscles, it's a 1-to-1 correlation. We know that meditation helps your brain function more effectively and more efficiently. Tons of neurological benefits from it, tons of studies that demonstrate that. So, coming back to what we teach and what we talk about in our family, there's different forms of meditation, but compassion meditation is a huge one. Probably the biggest one that we deal with is something called Tonglen.
Yeah.
And
Tonglen. I was
yeah,
wondering if you did Tonglen, or do you do meta present meditations too?
I don't do that. I'm not familiar with that specific one.
It's
No,
it's
not.
very much like Tonglen. Let's explain Tonglen to somebody in your words.
So Tonglen is you visualize breathing in the pain and suffering of others. And as you breathing that in, it becomes healed, transformed in that divinity within yourself. So it's not like you're actually taking it on. And then as you exhale, you're breathing back healing energy back to them. And I actually kind of came up with this thing called 7 breaths, and I wrote about it
Yes.
even in my book, Walking Through Anger. But it is
Wait, hold on. Walking Through Anger. That's your book.
yeah, Walking Through Anger,
Okay,
walking
everybody needs to know, man. Walking Through Anger, and it's on Amazon.
Amazon, yeah, bookstores, and it's about so much more than anger. I
Okay.
promise you that. But so in 7 breaths, and this is something I do every day. The first breath is for you and for your immediate loved ones. So
Yeah.
what you're breathing in there, all their pain and suffering, you visualize it being healed, and you exhale, you breathe it back to them. The next one is for the land that you're on, whether you want to call it your country or continent, whatever. You breathe in every living being, all the pain and suffering, breathe it back out to them. The next one is for the world. Again, same thing, in and out. Then you do the galaxy, the surrounding galaxies, the entire known universe. And then the seventh breath is for everything ever was, is, or will be in all dimensions beyond all human thought. Now, I tell you this because let's say someone's sitting there and saying, well, that's a bunch of hoopla, whatever. Imagine if, at a minimum, what you do is to your own mindset, begin your day by visualizing, breathing in the pain and suffering of everything that ever lived in every dimension and every if it's a multiverse, everything, and breathing healing energy back out to it. At a minimum, even if that's a bunch of hoopla, your mindset for the day is tremendous. You're not worried about the little thing that's bothering you this way. You're not worried about Sally said this and this. Your mindset is so much bigger. And at a maximum, imagine you being able to actually breathe and change your energy and impact other people's energy. It's a beautiful way to
Wow.
say that.
Hey, brother, I love your seven breaths. And
Thanks, man.
I love that you modified some of that Tonglen. The way I've been taught is, and it's critical, is when you breathe in the pain and suffering, you actually don't take it on, you transform it, right? And I think you said this. I want to make sure people know that. You
Yeah.
transform it and then you breathe out the blessings, right? I love your seven breaths about going big, right? Not just the world here. I always like to use an in breath of, even if a simpler one is just bless me indeed on the in breath, and then bless others through me on the out breath. It's a very simple meditation. Yeah. And you can use that mantra or whatever, just to, count your breaths. Wow. I love your seven breaths. I'm going to make sure we write that up and everybody can use that, because I think that what's really amazing about what you said is you started with your family, friends, and loved ones, but quickly expanded the universe, right? To the whole country, to the whole world, to the universe. And then you blew my mind by going, well, the galaxy that's not your close galaxy, and the next one. And then finally, ever it has been, it's kind of like the alpha and the omega, right? It all comes together.
And
Wow.
you're right, and it's good to highlight that. I probably said it, but I might have said it quickly.
You said it. You
That
did say it.
becomes transformed. And
Yes.
so you don't. So always, sometimes people say, "Well, I don't want to breathe in, taking on suffering, because that makes I don't want that energy." It's you have a divinity. So let's say something as beautiful as the tremendous figure Jesus said something like the kingdom of heaven is within.
Yes.
So we look at some of these wonderful teachers that talk about this stuff that is profound, and we have this divinity within. And so if divinity is receiving it, it becomes transformed. So
Yes.
heal it, exhaling it back out is healing. And I always say, because I work with people who are as skeptical as can be. And listen, I love be skeptical. Challenge everything, but also challenge your own ego. Because I
Yes.
always tell people, I say, listen, I'll go in a room full of people. I'll say, how many of you believe you still have more to learn? Every single hand goes up. Okay, it's cool. So why is it that if your hand goes up and you believe you have more to learn, why is it the moment someone disagrees with you, first thing you do is challenge, defend your position? If you really believe you have more to learn, why not seek to learn? So again, this is a way of life. This isn't just hey, I know this information. It's a practice and to live
Yes.
it.
Wow. You just tapped into something. I'm going to use that question because I speak to a lot of audiences too. And I like what you said, because you tee it up. How many, what'd you say? Have something to
I
learn?
say, how many of you believe you still have more to learn in
Yeah.
this life? And
Beautiful.
then when they get that up, and then I might even sometimes, because yield theory is getting behind people's eyes.
Oh, we're gonna go back to yield theory. Okay, but try this out. So my first principle on a new book coming out called The Glad to Be Here Mindset. We may change the title, who knows? But the first principle is learn, grow, give. And I define them differently. So learn is just what you talked about. There's a lot of information that we can learn. Grow is you actually apply it. It's what you said earlier, right? You actually know how to apply it and do it. And then, giving is, wow, well, I need to give in order to receive. And then I realized I got the order wrong. It really starts with giving, but I still like the flow, learn, grow, give. How does that fit for you? Tell me.
It sounds awesome. It sounds fantastic. I teach a lot the difference between the mindset of people who are struggling with mental weakness and then the difference between that and mental strength. People who are struggling especially with mental weakness, they have a tendency to look for how things don't work and why things won't work and why things won't fit. But if you have developed a mental strength, those who are mentally strong, the moment I hear something, I only look to see how can it work. What can that sounds great. Whatever order you put it in, I think the person who's reading it learns and they can integrate it in the way that works best for them. I'm always blown away to see those perspectives when people look and say, "Well, this can't work because of this." I don't have time for that. I only focus on what can work and how it can work. But I love
Wow.
that. I think that's great. It's really wonderful the ability to impact other people's lives. You had mentioned that meta. So when you say
Yeah.
meta, that meta, talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I'll give not only for us, but hopefully somebody's listening. It's a really beautiful, and I think it's called meta. I'm not 100% sure, but it goes simply like this. And that is the first thing you do is you say, may, so you go to your loved ones, you go to yourself and you say, may I be happy,
Oh,
may I be healthy. You got it. Go
I,
for it.
that's the yeah. I didn't call it that. Yes, we call it. May I be healthy. May I be peaceful. May all my good intentions be fulfilled. Is that it?
Yeah, yeah. And you can change the words a
Yeah.
little bit.
There
They
you go.
vary a little, but it usually starts with, may I be happy, right? May I be healthy. May I be safe is another word that's good to put in there. I love the may I be peaceful. And the other word I like to use is may I be at ease and well-being, right? So your life becomes ease and well-being. But then, as that's you do it for yourself first, which is
Mhm.
easy, right?
Right.
Then
Right.
you do it for a loved one. Hey, that's pretty easy too. Then you do it for a neutral person, someone you don't really know, right? Maybe you're going to bump into. Then it gets harder. Then you do it for somebody who's challenging you right now. And that's the key, right? Is then you start to have that beautiful feelings that you described about the whole world.
That's it. I had visualized whenever you initially said meta, METTA, but I realized that they've just made us aware with that. It's that loving kindness. So yes,
This is loving kindness. That's a
familiar with
better.
this, and yeah, and this is so. What I do is I write up on the board. I actually do this with officers. I train all the corrections officers in the state of Pennsylvania. They go through a 3-day yield theory training. All the new cadets, and so one of the things when we get to the part on meditation is I offer them that particular one where I
Ah,
say, and the three statements that we use are, may I be healthy, may I be peaceful, may all of my good intentions be fulfilled.
I
And
like
just
it.
the way you said it exactly, then you go to your loved ones. May my loved one be healthy. May they be peaceful. May all of their good intentions be fulfilled. And one of the ways that I have taught this historically has been this: when you get to the person that you're struggling with the most, if you can't say it for them right away, that's okay. Come back to the people you can. Start again. Concentric circles, keep going out. And then what you'll find is over time, maybe it takes you a couple weeks. That's cool. Eventually, you'll find yourself saying it without even realizing it. And it's extraordinarily powerful. We've seen tons of anecdote. I say you clinically, we use that as one that can be studied for compassion meditation. But we've seen
Wow.
tons of anecdotal information as well, where I've seen that happen, and even in my own life, where if somebody I was struggling with, I'd say it for a period of time, and then just had that person just walk in and sit down and want to talk. So it's just amazing. It really is. It's powerful, and we
Wow.
we
Hey, I
can
like,
practice compassion.
man, I love that. I like the third one again. I want to make sure I understand it. You said, may all my good intentions be fulfilled.
Yes. So what I tell people is this. So let's again, you hit the nail on the head. When it's yourself, your loved one, piece of cake. But think about this. Let's take the person you're struggling with, okay? And if you were to practice this, and if the person you were struggling with actually was healthy and peaceful, and their good intentions were fulfilled, you would not be struggling with this person. So, at a minimum, let's say you're struggling too much, maybe you're hurt too badly to see past your own pain. So, you say, I don't want to help them in any way. At a minimum, if you do this, it's going to help you. And that's not the reason why you're doing it, but hey, that's the most resistant spot. We'll start with that. Um,
Enlightened self-interest.
yeah, and again, my goal with field theory is about meeting people where they are. So if that's where someone is, I would rather take that. Like I tell young people all the time, I have this really cool thing. I show this picture of these two dinosaurs, a Protoceratops and a Velociraptor, and they got into a fight, and a sand dune collapsed on them. And so I show this fossils. It's a real picture. So in my talks, I do this. and I'll show this picture, and I say to young people all the time, what do you think the odds are that this happened, that they got preserved in this moment? This could have been a nice little dinosaur mom and dad. They could have been nice little members of their dinosaur community, but all of a sudden they get into their worst moment. They get in a fight, and a freaking sand dune collapses on them. A Protoceratops biting the Velociraptor. Velociraptor's got his claw on the Protoceratops. So I say to them, what are the odds? What are the odds that this happened? And obviously it's astronomical, right? That moment would be captured and preserved for all time. And you say, come on, Doc, what's this have to do with us? Well, last year there were more than 2.5 billion cell phone cameras that captured more than 1 trillion photos. So what do you think the odds are that your worst moment will be captured and preserved for all time? Significantly greater. Now, I'm not telling you to have good character because you're worried about getting in trouble. I want you to have good character because that's the right thing to do. But if I can meet the most resistant, self-centered person where he or she is and have you not be hurtful because you don't want to get in trouble, we'll start with that. I'll take that because over time you'll start to gain insight and see that there's a better reason to be compassionate and become the best version of yourself.
Man, this has been amazing. I want to keep going, but we're going to start to wrap.
Sure.
What I want you to do, though, is make sure we've covered your yield theory. Is there any other pieces to it that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean it's complex. Essentially, yield theory is about meeting people where they are. It's
Okay.
about circumventing their fight or flight response and speaking in ways that can be heard, regardless of the emotions that are being experienced. So you think about this. If a bear walks in the room right away, your amygdala, your center of your fight or flight response, it sends a message to your adrenal gland and says, watch out, right? If a bear's coming in, now you're either going to fight this bear, you're going to freeze, or you're going to flee. Fight, flight, or freeze response. Now, if you got a bunch of young people in a room, they'll be like, I'll fight that bear, but come on now. That bear comes in, you're not fighting him. So now that's what's fascinating about neuroscience and the world we live in today. The same thing occurs if your loved one looks at you and says, we need to talk. Same kind of stuff. So neurologically, your adrenaline, your amygdala send a message to your adrenal glands, fight or flight response is on. Now you're defensive. You're not ready to listen. And essentially, I don't want to make any neuroscientists cringe by simplifying the brain this much, but essentially, you have a limbic system, your emotional system in the center of your brain, and then you have your frontal cortex, your higher level thinking. And so, what I've spent a career devoted to is how do we get around that limbic system and speak to the frontal cortex, regardless of the intensity. And this is what I've made a career out of doing. And that's what yield theory is. And it begins by meeting people where they are, what they're ready, willing, and able to take in. And ultimately, it comes down to doing 3 things. Like I said, be skeptical of others, but be skeptical of yourself first and foremost, of your own ego. And that's what I did. I practice what I teach. So I said to myself, Gucci, I said, listen, what is it that I really do? I stand at a cell door and talk to somebody. I sit in a comfortable Zen office, talk to somebody, sit on TV and talk. What do I do? And I realized I do 3 things. All right, so I listen, I validate, and I explore options. That's it. Those are the 3 things. So about 8 years ago, I was at this mental health convention. I'm speaking to about 500 mental health specialists, right? This woman comes up to me at the break and she's dressed to the nines and she's pretty condescending. It's always fun when someone comes up to you and they're condescending. And she looks at me and she said, that's it? That's your big theory? 3 things? I said, yes, ma'am. But if you think about it, all Bruce Lee ever did was move, block, and hit. He did pretty well for himself. So,
Did that resonate with her? She didn't know who he was, huh?
no, I don't think she did know who it was. I don't think she was interested in my answer, but I was glad about it. But I said this in life, it's not about saying the words move, block, and hit. It's how you do it. When it comes to listening, validating, explore options, it's how you do it. So I train people in how to listen, validate, and explore options. And yes, I do like to simplify things for people. When I was young, I was, I'm blessed with this high IQ, was pushed to read things that were probably way too advanced for me. I was in high school reading GWF Hegel, and I remember thinking this is way too complex. And
Hey,
I
I don't even know who that is, man.
He's
Who's
a
GW?
German philosopher,
Okay, got it.
and super convoluted in his writing, right? So I was reading it and I thought to myself, this really has driven my career. I was in high school and I said, I threw the book down. I said, when I get older, I will never make things this complicated for people.
Right.
So I have spent my career breaking down really esoteric concepts and just make them super simple and applicable to people. So I do break down yield theory into listen, validate, explore options. Now, if you want to go deep, the reality is it can go really deep as analytical psychology, the deepest psychology you can get. And it's driven by 7 fundamental components. I'll rattle them off, and that'll be enough of talking about it. But just in general, how we listen, validate, and explore options is driven by what we call acceptance, accepting where people are, what they're ready, willing, and able to take in. Authenticity, you got to be genuine when you're doing what you're doing. Compassion, conscious education, creativity, because we're meeting diverse learners where they are, a mindfulness, and then non-attachment. And non-attachment
Mm.
is really, it really defines whether or not someone's practicing yield theory or not. We all know we're not our things, right? We know we're not our things. If you lose your piece of jewelry, it doesn't make you less of a person. But the same is true with our thoughts. We're not our thoughts. If we change our thoughts, we learn new thoughts, we grow. It doesn't make us less of a human being. So learning to practice non-attachment, that's enormous, and it's a huge part of yield theory. It might be easy to get this in right here. Like I tell a lot of stories. I'm a storyteller, so you have over 100 little Zen tales and things in walking through anger. Lots of I've written 10 books. A lot of them have stories, little stories throughout. But um, I love to learn through that way, so I teach that way. But at the end of the day, it's about practicing it. Can we live our message? That's what it's about.
Wow. Doc, man, that is so deep. We'll have you back on and go deeper in some of that. But where can people go to get that? Is that through Walking Through Anger, or is that in a different book?
So, Walking Through Anger is probably the book that teaches the most about yield theory. I go over all the yield theory, but I do it in a way that applies to everybody. So, you don't have to have a background in psychology or anything. You don't have to have any pre existing knowledge on this subject. You just pick it up. If you communicate at all, this book is a good book for you. I feel proud of it. I think it's a very solid book. I do feel proud of that. And then I have other books like Teaching Stories and Life Lessons, which are like 1 to 2 pages with a. You can pick it up, flip to a random page, and get a story with a lesson. I don't need to jump into a bunch of stuff, but that
Yeah.
Walking Through Anger is a great book. And then I have a YouTube channel that's a free resource for people. We hear from people all over the world, and I think that's,
What's the name of the YouTube channel?
just Dr. Christian Conte.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you just
Dr.
Google it
Christian
or
Conte.
just type in my name, Dr. Christian Conte, Conte, you'll find me on there.
Okay, I got 2 last questions because I want to keep going only because they're so powerful. What's the difference, in your opinion, between empathy and compassion?
Well, so that's a great question. So we used to say there was something called compassion fatigue, and what they
Yes.
found was, and now that word has been now changed to empathic distress, and here's why. This is super important to understand. It's not just words. It's not just like political correctness. There's a difference. So compassion is like love. It's a wellspring. It's never ending. You don't run out of compassion. You can burn out of empathy. So empathy is directly related to our mirror neurons. And next time we talk, I'll talk about the viewers all about the mirror neurons. But we all have mirror neurons, and essentially those are our seat of vicarious learning, and it's the seat of our empathy. And what we can do when we are in very difficult situations, traumatic situations, or if you're a first responder, if you're a counselor, if you've been to war, you might have PTSD, you can really burn out with your mirror neurons of empathy. And so it's called empathic distress. And if you don't take care of yourself and you don't learn to have different outlets, you can run out. You'll find yourself being less empathetic toward others. You're going to find yourself being short with people. But you're not going to ever. It's the same. Compassion is equivalent with love. Like, you're not running out of compassion. You are burned out, and that's why it's called empathic distress rather than compassion fatigue. So great question.
Wow. Hey, I've got somebody for you to talk to. I'm going to go ahead and clip that piece and send it to her. She's a CEO of an organization, and she's needs some help on compassion fatigue. So I think you could be the guy, man. Okay, love it. Hey, my last question: why are you glad to be here, and what does that mean to you?
Listen, I am so thankful every day of my life. I open my eyes, and the very first thing I say is thank you so much for letting me be alive. I'm so genuinely thankful. And I am driven. I'll tell you why I'm driven. I'm going to tell you why I'm driven. So there was a gnat And this gnat, he fell asleep on this bull's horns, right? So he falls asleep on this bull's horns, and when he wakes up from his nap, he says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Bull. I fell asleep. I'll take off now." And the bull said, "Psh, I didn't even know you were there." And the first time I heard that story, it echoed through me. I mean, my goodness, Gucci, it went through my whole body. And I realized on a deep level that I never want to be that gnat. I don't want the world to look at me and say, I didn't even know you were here. So I wake up with a fire every day. I'm grateful to be alive, and I'm building my legacy and trying to impact this world the best way that I can.
Doc, what a great story. I know you're a storyteller. That rocked me to the heart, man. That is awesome. You are doing it. You're making a difference. And let's keep that up, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Glad to be
Thank
here.
you very much. I appreciate you. Definitely appreciate you.